thanks for being here tonight, everybody. My name is Jim Upgren. I work for the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction. One of the programs that I'm responsible for is our state scholarship program. So to visit with you guys tonight, we had a little conversation earlier with some of the people that were here beginning, or a little bit earlier. The scholarship requirements are changing. This program has been around since 2009, but for the first time since the program was started, in 2021, our legislature pretty much rewrote the requirements to align with our state's Choice Ready initiative. And so that was passed in March of 2021 during the 21 legislative session. And in that bill, they specified that any student that was currently in high school at the time the bill passed would be grandfathered in and could still qualify under the old set of requirements. So that would mean this year's juniors and seniors are still eligible to use the old set of requirements. The old set of requirements are outlined very nicely in this blue brochure that you have here, and this also has my contact information in it. Most of my presentation today is going to focus on the new set of requirements, which is going to be this other handout that you guys have here, the chart. And so we're going to focus most of the presentation on the new set of requirements. If you do happen to have a son or daughter that is a junior or senior and you have questions regarding the old set of requirements or want to know if the students are on pace, you can definitely visit with the school about that. You can also certainly visit with me either tonight or later after the fact if you'd like. One thing that I'll let you guys know too is that we have what's called the e-transcript system, which the school can look up any of the students that go to school here and see if they're on pace for the scholarship or not. There's a nice little chart there that does that. I, as a state director, have access to the public school transcripts of every student in the state. So if you're wondering if your son or daughter is on pace for any of these scholarships and you want to, kind of go right to the top and find out, go right from the source, give me a call or shoot me an email. I'm happy to take a look at your son or daughter's transcript and look it up and help you guys out with that. So I just wanted to kind of mention that. So, like I had said, this program has been around since 2009. It started out as the Academic and CTE Scholarship and was rewritten in 2021 as the North Dakota Scholarship. So at the end of the 2024 school year, after our current juniors graduate, these two scholarships, the academic and CTE, are going to go away, and we're going to have just the one scholarship, our new scholarship, and it's going to be just called simply North Dakota Scholarship. Okay, so the class of 2025 is the first class that is required to follow the new set of requirements. So our current seniors and our current juniors can use either set of requirements. I anticipate that most of them will use the old set of requirements for a couple reasons. One is what they had already been starting to work towards when they were in high school. And secondly, the new scholarship requirements are set up in a way that if a student who meets these requirements, 95% chance they're also going to meet the requirements of one of the other two. And since we already have systems set up to evaluate students for these two, we're pretty much, for these next 2 years, for our juniors and seniors the next 2 years, we're going to be looking at them for these two scholarships first, and if they don't qualify for one of these, then take a look here. A student can only get one of the scholarships, even if they qualify for one. So that's the reason why we kind of do it that way. So just so I have a sense of the audience, I asked a few people here earlier, how many parents of seniors do we have here? And I realize as we go down the list here, some people might raise their hand more than once. So parents of seniors, parents of juniors, okay, sophomores, freshmen, 7th or 8th grade, and obviously younger than 7th and 8th grade. Okay? So that's good that we have a lot of younger people here, because it sounds like everybody here is going to be impacted with these new requirements here. Everybody, if you have somebody who's a sophomore or young. All right. So again, the requirements are written into state law. They're written into the North Dakota Century Code, and it's also written into law that every single student in the state that meets every single requirement of one of these scholarships gets a scholarship, regardless of how many students that ends up being. All right. But also, because the requirements are written into state law, if a student is missing even one requirement, they're guaranteed not to get the scholarship. And because this is written in law, I really don't have any flexibility to make exceptions or anything like that. That's why I like doing these types of presentations in the fall, especially if a student is a senior. That way, if there's something that they're missing, we can make that correction hopefully by the time they graduate. It's a $1,500 per year or $6,000 total scholarship, so it's obviously not going to cover the cost of somebody's entire college experience. But I always tell students, you want to take advantage of as much free money as you can, because it all adds up. And a student has to attend school in North Dakota to be able to use
Does that include Jamestown and Mary or not?
Yep, good question. So the North Dakota University system, this is kind of a joint effort between DPI and the university system. We take care of it at the high school level, doing presentations like this, promoting it, and then evaluating the applications. And then each spring, once we have all the names for that year's seniors, we send that off to the university system, and they're the ones that divvy out the money. But the question is, could it be used at Mary or Jamestown? The answer is yes. Even though they're not North Dakota University system institutions, they can still use the money at those places. Okay, one other thing I'll point out too is that in 2021 they added some language to the Century Code that allows for professional schools such as Lennis Welding or Joseph Sarah Design School to also be a place where a student can use the scholarship money in. And I think that's a good addition because we want students to follow their passions and not just go someplace because the scholarship might be good. So, excellent question. I'm glad you asked that. And we have a pretty small group here too, so if you have questions throughout the presentation, just go ahead and throw them out and we'll make this pretty informal. Again, the timeline, we've already kind of talked about that. If you're a junior or senior this year, you can use either the old or the new set of requirements. If you're a sophomore or younger, you have to use the new set of requirements. So general qualifications, I'll talk about this very generally first, and then we'll dive into exactly what all this means. So first of all, a student has to have high school grade point average of 3.0 or higher at the time they graduate, and that's the cumulative grade point average, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then there's testing components here depending on which pathway a student goes. Courses that are taken in high school come into play, and then there's some other indicators that are aligned to our Choice Ready initiative. I have to mention this, even though I'm guessing Valley City is probably not going to be impacted by this, but students do have to be North Dakota residents. This comes into play more if I'm in a school that's 5 miles from the border or something like that. I'm assuming everybody who goes to school here is a North Dakota resident, but just one of those things I always have to point out. So as far as how the scholarship can be used, again, we already talked about college or university, and then they just added the words professional school. In North Dakota, that's the key word, it has to be in-state. Students have up to 6 years after they graduate to use the scholarship money. And then the students can use this either for undergraduate or graduate studies. So if they leave the state for undergrad and come back from grad school, they can use some of the money for that. So let's go ahead and dive into the requirements of our new scholarship here, our new scholarship requirements. And that's going to be that chart that you have, which I'm going to be referring back to numerous times for the rest of the presentation here. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to talk about how the chart itself is set up, and then we will dive into each of these individual indicators as we go forward here. So first here we have the essential skills portion up on the top in yellow. Every student, if they're going to go for the scholarship, has to meet the essential skills, and basically what you have here is you have this first sentence here. 3 out of these 4 are things that the students should already be doing. The only one that the student is really going to have the most control over is going to be that grade point average. And we're going to talk about all these individually in a second here. And then you've got 8 different indicators listed here that are the actual essential skills. A student has to meet 4 out of those 8. And we'll talk about each of those in detail in just a second. So then once a student meets the essential skills portion, then we come down here and we have post-secondary ready on the left, workforce ready in the middle, military ready on the right. Students have to meet the requirements of 2 of the 3 pathways on the bottom, in addition to the essential skills. And like I had said earlier, this is aligned to our state's Choice Ready initiative, which is part of our state's accountability. Schools have to fill out a report each year, a Choice Ready report, and then schools get some of their accountability points are based on the number of students that meet the Choice Ready requirements as far as which different pathways that they achieve. The scholarship requirements are written a little bit above what is part of that Choice Ready pathway. But so anyways, that's kind of how we got to where we are with these new requirements. Does everybody understand how to read the chart and what is required as far as different pathways? They have to meet the yellow, and then 2 out of 3 on the bottom. Does that make sense? Okay. So we'll dive into the requirements itself a little bit here. Okay, we already talked about how the chart works. Let's get through that. So let's talk about the beginning requirements, or the very first requirements at the top of the yellow. First, individual consultation, individual career consultation, or a 9-week career course. This is something that schools, public schools in North Dakota are required by law to do in either grade 7 or 8. So this is going to be something that if your son or daughter attended school in North Dakota in grade 7 or 8, they've met this requirement. Okay, so this should be one you probably shouldn't have to worry about.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yep.
So this is completed with me, and we do individual consultations. So we complete that when they're doing all their registration stuff for the next school year. So just FYI.
Yep.
Yep.
North Dakota civics exam, this is also something that is required by law for students to graduate from high school, so it's something the students will already be doing, so they shouldn't have to worry too much about this. And then you also have what's called a 4-year rolling plan. This is something else that's associated with Choice Ready. This is where the school, somebody from the school is going to meet individually with each student, either towards the end of 8th grade or the beginning of 9th grade. They're going to talk about their 4-year plan as far as different courses that they're taking and how that might relate to whatever their goals are for after they graduate from high school. Then they're going to touch base with that student again on an annual basis each year, and that follow-up might only be a 5 or 10 minute meeting, just something really quick, just to make sure that nothing's changed. You know, believe it or not, what a student thinks they're interested in going into when they're in 9th grade might change significantly by the time that they're in 12th grade. You know, so that continuous conversation going on with that. So that's something that the school should already be doing as part of the Choice Ready initiative. So students should be able to know that that's something that they'll be doing. Biggest thing that younger students have control over with this scholarship, all students, but younger students especially, is that grade point average. Encouraging students to get as high of a grade point average as they possibly can, simply because not only for this scholarship, but for other scholarships, and just to do well in school in general. So. And then once they meet that first sentence on the top there, then you've got the 8 essential skills. And students have to meet 4 out of the 8 essential skills. Now the first one that they have to have here, or that they could have, is 25 hours of community service. And this can be 25 hours total any time between the first day of school in 9th grade and the day they graduate from high school. Community service basically should be, it should not be something the student's getting paid for. It should not be something the student would normally be expected to do anyways, like regular household chores or anything like that. I get asked about fundraisers. What if I help out at a fundraiser? Can that count? I think that depends on what kind of fundraiser it is. You know, let's say that there's a sick member of the community and you're doing a fundraiser to raise money to pay that person's medical bills or something. That type of fundraiser, absolutely, that's community service. You're helping somebody out. If it's a local sports team raising money to go play in a tournament out of state, I would say no, that's not community service. That's a different type of fundraiser. So basically that is kind of the gist with that. If it's something that benefits others, then it can count as community service. A student could also, like if they're already doing community service for maybe their church or like confirmation or something like that, they can definitely count that as community service as well, because they are, you know, doing some service to others.
I was gonna say, I have students that, because I actually track it, so
Yeah.
I have students that get their community service from teaching Sunday school.
Yep.
So if the girls are helping teach Sunday school this year, I, as the Sunday school coordinator person, track those hours and I report it to Ms. Ega.
Yep.
So that she's able to get that.
And so kind of working backwards as far as how it's tracked. The school fills out what's called the Choice Ready Report in the spring. We're able to pull a lot of data right from that. So the school goes in for each student and just checks the box whether yes or no the student has the 25 hours of community service. And then it's up to the school to have documentation from the student. And the student, I recommend that students have some kind of a log or something like that to kind of keep track. And then we always recommend that the schools, you know, have that on file just in case, you know, we ever need to, you know, ask for anything like that. The log itself is not what's sent to the school, to the state. The school will have some type of verification from the student, and then the school fills out it. So it sounds like what you guys are doing with that.
Yeah, we just started, do have forms in the counseling center that students can pick up so that they can keep track of it themselves, and then they can either keep it or I can keep it too.
Because I think
To
they
keep
brought it to
track
me
of
at the
it.
end of the year, I signed it.
Yeah.
We put the number of hours on there, and then I
Yeah.
just kind of tracked it to make sure it was equivalent,
Yep.
but Wendy could easily do the same thing with the kids at
As long
at
as,
your church.
yeah, as long as
Yeah.
the school has a
Yeah.
way to document, has a way to get in contact with whoever's in charge of that, should they need to do that, which in this case it sounds like it would be like yourself at Sunday school and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then the next option here is if a student is present in school 95% or more percent of the time, all right? And I get asked the question, well, what about if I'm sick? Or what about if I get COVID? Or what if I have to miss a week to go to a funeral? Or whatever the case might be. Well, I think it would be different if this was like a hard and fast, you have to meet this requirement, but it's one of 8 things that a student can meet. And because of that, it is pretty strict in that you do have to be there 95% of the time. You notice there it does say excluding school activities. Technically, if you're gone because you're playing in a basketball game or something like that for school, you're technically in school, even though you might not be in the classroom. So if you do the math on that, 95% attendance comes out to roughly 7 full days of school you could miss per year and still hit 95%. So, and that's data that we just pull right from Power School because the attendance is in Power School. A career exploration experience such as a job fair or a guest speaker talking about careers, something like that. The next 2 I'll talk about together here. 2 years of organized co-curricular or 2 years of extracurricular. So co-curricular would be things like FFA, FCCLA, FBLA, DECA, band, choir, something that is tied to one of your classes in school. Okay, so like for example, band and choir, you have your in-school portion that you have to do during class, but then you also have concerts and performances and maybe marching parades or whatever else goes on for that. So that would be an example of a co-curricular. Extracurricular is going to be like sports, cheerleading, stuff like that, stuff that generally takes place outside of school. A couple things I'll mention about extracurriculars. Number 1, it does not necessarily have to be a school-related extracurricular activity. If a student is in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or maybe some type of sports through your park district or something like that, that can count, all right? The other thing, you'll notice it says 2 years of extracurricular. So I get asked sometimes, does that mean that I have to play football in the fall and then I have to play basketball in the winter and then I have to go out for track in the spring and do it for a whole 2 years? The answer is no. If you go out for 2 seasons of track and field, you've met the requirements. Okay, so as long as you have 2 school years where you're in at least one extracurricular activity, then you meet that requirement.
Would 4-H be an example of a co-curricular activity?
I would say 4-H, so I would say 4-H is probably more extracurricular because it's outside of the school setting, whereas FFA would be co-curricular because it is directly. You guys have FFA in Valley City?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, because it is, FFA would be co-curricular because it's directly related to your agriculture class. So, I know that there's a lot of similarities between 4-H and FFA, but I would say just because 4-H is not directly tied to one of the classes, I would say it's more extracurricular.
Same thing. How are we tracking that a certain way? Limited, so if the kid, I don't know what they'd be in that's not any of that, but then.
Well, the good thing is, so
Or
again,
yeah.
school's responsible for documenting that. If it's a school-related activity, it's pretty easy for the school because they have, on whatever rosters they have. If it's a non, then the school will have to work with the students to just make sure that they have whatever proof that they need to do that.
We still do job fair and that stuff?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, Jim, if you can explain the career exploration experience a little bit.
Like a job fair.
Yeah, if you have a job fair and you have all your students go to that, yeah, mark it off.
What about Are You Ready stuff? Does that not count as career exploration?
Are You Ready in and of itself? I would say unless it's directly tied to where they're getting something a little more in depth as far as either getting some direct exposure to what the career might be, either through maybe a job shadow or maybe a guest speaker or a career fair or something like that. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, so just like a lesson on career.
A lesson on career exploration. This
would
has to
not
be a little
count.
piece of.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
But if you load all your 9th graders on the bus and take them to Fargo for a job fair or something like that,
Mhm.
you bet, mark it off for all of them then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do have career fair every 2 years usually, and then sometimes they'll randomly pop up. They're not always planned, but usually it's someone in the community that plans them. But at least it will happen once every 2 years, so they should be able to get that
They'd be
at some point. Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys do a senior capstone project at all?
No,
Okay,
we
so-
don't. I think the academy will. We have a new career pathway academy, but that would only be those students that are in that. Yeah.
So we'll kind of skip through that. An online learning course, I'm going to say right now that any senior that tries to go for the youth scholarship requirement has automatically met this requirement. Because what happened when they were in 9th grade?
COVID.
That was when everything shut down and everybody was doing an online class. A couple things about online classes. What did Valley City do that next fall then, like the first full school year after the pandemic started? Were you guys face to face? No hybrid or anything like that? Okay. Yeah, because I get asked about like with hybrid, could hybrid count? And the answer is no, because the purpose of an online learning course is to teach students to really do everything entirely online, including that communication with the teacher. Because if I'm struggling with like if we're doing hybrid and I'm struggling on my online day, it's very easy for me to just say, well, I'm just going to talk to the teacher in person when I see them tomorrow. Whereas if you're online, you have to reach out and do that. Same with an ITV class. An ITV class wouldn't count for this either, because really an ITV class pretty much is a face-to-face class, except for it's on TV. So online learning class would be another option. And then the 8th option here, demonstrating competency in the 21st century skills. The 21st century skills, the 4 C's, are creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. And this one is kind of a judgment call on the part of the school. The school, when they're filling out the report, they do have to make a judgment on each student. They do have a rubric that schools can use if they'd like that relates to that. But so that is something that the school has the option of doing, and again, it does require a little bit of judgment. So a student has to have 4 out of these 8 in order to meet that yellow essential skills column. Does anybody have any questions on the essential skills? This is probably the part that's maybe in some ways the biggest change, because it's kind of a new concept. Whereas previously with the scholarship, I can pretty much get it all off the high school transcript. Which a lot of this, as we move on, we'll be able to get off the high school transcript. Some of this is just a little bit different. It's kind of more building well-rounded kids and that type of thing. It's different. So
Maybe the way we're dealing with the 4 C's thing.
We do not have that. So we don't do the 4 C's at the school. The ones that we focus on the most are the community service, the attendance. Well, that one is kind of more on the student, but the 25 hours, the career exploration, and then the co-curricular, extracurricular, and the online learning. Those are kind of the ones that we focus on, since we don't have the capstone project or the 21st century skills. I think there's talk about incorporating that at some point, but it's kind of a whole thing, so we don't have that at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
But students should be getting 4 just based off the other ones too, so.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood. Like I knew we time it before. I was like, no.
If they did an online course like over the summer, for example,
Oh yeah,
that would count.
you're talking like an online course that
Yeah,
goes on the
like through the
transcript.
school, yeah,
Yeah.
or
absolutely.
through the state, yeah.
Yep, as long as it ends up on the high school transcript.
Because we have those.
Does an online driving course count?
I would say probably not. I mean, I get asked these questions about, does it have to be school related? And I think it all depends on how in depth something is. Online driving course, like,
It's 30 hours. It is 30
Was it 30 hours?
Does it go on their transcript?
no.
That would be the catch, I think, right? Is
Well-
if it shows up on their transcript.
And this is a discussion that we've had too, as far as, doesn't have to be some school related. Let's do this. If I don't talk to you next week, remind me, I will look into this a little bit more. Okay. All right, let's go ahead.
That is a good question.
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
So, okay, post-secondary ready. So now we're on the bottom portion of the chart here. And once again, student has to have 2 out of the 3 columns to meet 2 out of the 3 on the bottom to qualify for the scholarship. So the first one here, first requirement for post-secondary ready, is that a student has to have an ACT score of 24 or above. Okay, so that's the first one. They have to have an ACT of 24 or above. And then they have to meet any 2 additional requirements on the bottom of the chart. So it's 24 on the ACT plus any 2 of these. A C or higher in an AP course. Do you guys have AP courses in Valley City?
No.
Okay. So then, you guys dual credit though?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So one option here is a C or higher in a dual credit English or math course. A C or higher for 1 credit of Algebra 2. A score of 3 or higher in an AP exam. Now, one thing I'll point out about the AP exam, you do not have to be enrolled in an AP course to pay for and take an AP exam. If you pass an AP exam, you can apply and get college credit at certain universities. Okay? So this is something for students to keep in mind, is that even though they might not be taking any AP courses, let's say the student feels that they're really good at US history, and and they decide they want to challenge the AP exam in US history, they would have to sign up and pay for that test, and if they passed it, they could use it to get college credit. And in this case here, they'd be able to check that off the list here. International Baccalaureate, this was written into the law partially because it was part of what's also in our Choice Ready framework. International Baccalaureate is not really big here in North Dakota. I know it's big over in Minnesota, but if a student was to transfer and have a 4 or higher on an IB exam, you know, something like that, then they could use that here. And then another option here is if they have a 3.0 grade point average strictly amongst the courses that are required for university system admission. And that's basically your English, social studies, math, science. Okay? So once again, ACT of 24, and then any 2 of these. Any questions on this pathway, the post-secondary ready path? Okay.
What's all dual credit? I mean, we got rid of like,
Yeah, we have a lot on.
so like AP and dual credit US history doesn't help me, is that fair?
We'll do it. So okay, dual credit history would not count for this column here. It would count in the next column.
But we have,
But I couldn't take dual, I mean, I gotta get through this column to get to that column though.
Well, you have to have 2
You
of the
have
3.
2
So,
out of the 3 of these.
so you could do workforce.
Well, my kids are gonna get through this column, to get to that column.
Okay.
Then you can take dual credit English.
We
in both
do
your
have dual,
juniors.
yeah.
Okay. All right. And then workforce ready, which is in the middle in the blue on your chart. First, a student would have to do 4 credits of career and technical education, with 2 of those credits in the same coordinated plan of studies. Career and technical education are going to be things like agriculture, business, family consumer science, marketing, health careers, trade and industry, manufacturing. If anybody's taking like some of the automotive classes, I don't know if you guys have those here or not, but those would all count as career tech ed. So they have to have 4 credits of those types of classes with at least 2 of them in the same coordinated plan, same column on the chart. And then they either have to get a 24 on the ACT, or if they don't get a 24 on the ACT, they can take what's called the work keys test. You guys offer the work keys here at Valley City High School?
Yeah, they're senior year.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Senior year if they don't get the 24.
If they don't get the
Okay.
24, yeah.
And how the work keys works is, I get asked a lot, is the work keys an easier test than the ACT? And I don't know that I would say it's an easier test. I think it's a different test. It measures a different type of skills. The ACT is purposely designed to measure or try to predict how well will you do in college. Whereas the work keys is designed to measure how will you do on the job, how will you do on the workforce. You'll notice that there's a math section in each of those tests. The math on the ACT is algebra, geometry, you know, that type of stuff. This kind of math that you do in school. The math on the work keys test is going to be more of the type of math that you might expect to find on the workforce, in the real world, you know, that type of thing. Okay? Same with the graphic literacy, same with the workplace documents. It's going to be more oriented towards what you might see on a daily basis at work as opposed to more of the academic school type thing. So if your son or daughter did not score up to that 24 on the ACT, I would recommend that if they meet the other requirements for this pathway, definitely visit with Ms. Eggum about trying to line up work keys tests during their senior year and do that.
And
7, by the way, 7 is the highest you can get. You say you have to get a 5, 7 is the highest you can get.
I do keep track of that. So the students that didn't get a 24 that qualify, I reach out to them and I talk to them about it at the beginning of their senior year. So
Okay.
yeah.
And then keep in mind those CTE, like traditionally, right, when we think CTE, we think, oh, it has to be up at the Career and Tech building. Not necessarily true. We have CTE classes here in our building as well. Those are our business classes, marketing, our tech ed. When we have a fax teacher, there are fax classes. So just keep in mind that those encompass those CTE
Is that
credits as well.
multimedia one too?
Yes.
Okay.
But they would need to be, so for example, marketing, and then like there's that other one. Is there another one you do? Like it has to be within that. You
Yeah, it has
couldn't,
to
like,
be
go take
within
a
the
nursing
coordinated.
class and then
Yeah.
There's a
that,
chart
right?
online that's
Yeah.
about 8
Okay.
pages thick, about 40 or so different plans. You have to have 2 full credits in any one column.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anybody has trouble finding that, shoot me an email and we have
Yeah,
to
or you can ask.
And you, sounds like they.
Yeah, I
you gotta have
usually
it.
look at that too, but yeah, you can always ask if you want to know
Okay.
for yourself. Yeah.
And then, so in addition to these 2 requirements, the 4 credits of CTE and the testing requirement, there's going to be several other additional indicators that you pick 2 of. Okay. So one is career ready practices. Now this can be either an independent course or if the career ready practices are integrated into some of your CTE coursework you're already doing, that can count as well. A grade of C or higher in any dual credit course, so like that US history class you talked about earlier, could count right here. A technical assessment or industry credential, this could be the State Department of Career Tech Ed has a nice list online that has all of their approved credentials and assessments listed. So a first aid certificate, or like first aid CPR or OSHA or something like that would count. We'll talk about these next two together here. We have 40-hour workplace learning experience, 40-hour work-based learning experience. A work-based learning experience is going to be something like a cooperative learning experience or a job simulation. You guys do that, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so like for example, in construction class, they like build a house. That would be
Yeah.
work-based,
Yeah,
just as an
work-based.
example,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, but I'm assuming it takes more than 40 hours for a group of students to build a house.
Yes.
Okay, and then a workplace learning experience is just student has a job. Student becomes part of the workforce. They can get a job at McDonald's for 40 hours during the summer between their junior and senior year, for example, and count that. And then one other option, does Valley City use the ACT for accountability, or do you guys use
Yes.
the state? Okay,
Yeah.
so when the students during the junior year take that test, the ACT test for accountability, if on that test the student scores a 19 in English and a 22 in math, then they can check this particular box off as well. Okay, so they have to meet any two of these items here, plus the CTE classes and the testing to meet the workforce ready column. Okay, any questions on that column, the workforce ready in blue? Yeah.
The 4 credits of CTE, that means 8 semester classes, right?
Yep.
Because they're all half.
If they're all half credits, yeah,
Mhm.
8 semesters. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you're welcome.
And actually, I'm going back to a prior thing quick, just because we gotta get going.
Sure.
Co-curricular, what is robotics? Is that co-curricular or extracurricular?
Is it, okay, so is it tied to any of your classes?
Well, I mean,
Or is it strictly like an after school?
there is a tech, I think there is a robotics
Yeah,
class.
I would say that's extracurricular,
Okay.
right?
That's
I
kinda
mean,
what I'm
there's
You don't have to be in a tech ed class in order to
Yep.
take
Yeah.
robotics.
yeah.
So it would be probably more
Okay,
extra.
I was just curious.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, excellent question. Alright. Okay, and then let's move on to the military ready, that's gonna be in the purple in the bottom left, bottom right hand corner. So a score of 85 or higher on the ASVAB, unless a student has completed basic training, then they need a score of 31. A C or higher in a physical education course, and then they can pick any 2 indicators from either of the other 2 columns that they haven't already used. Okay, and if they do that, then they've met the military ready portion. Okay?
So I have a question on
Yep.
these 3, because you gotta
Yep.
get, you have to, two
Yep.
of these, right?
Yep.
So if you don't get a 24 in your ACT, you could be really hung up.
Yeah, so if you don't get a 24 on the ACT,
Because if you didn't get a 24, you're probably not gonna get an 85.
well, and there's
That's
been,
that.
yep, and there's been some discussion about that, and in fact, I reached out to schools last year and asked for them to give me some data, because we don't have access to the ASVAB data the same way we do to ACT and word keys. And we have visited with some state legislators, and it sounds like there's at least gonna be a bill introduced during this 2023 session that will look at lowering that. Obviously, it's never a for sure thing, but we have those conversations. I'm also in charge of the legislative work at DPI, and so I'm directly involved in those conversations. And we'll be keeping the school posted throughout the session as far as where things are at with that bill. And so it's possible that that score of 85 might come down.
But that 24 is kind of the hanging.
Yeah, the 24 is a non-negotiable over on the
But you
post-secondary
still-
ready side. Yeah,
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah, so,
yeah.
because the 24 is, yeah.
Yep, and that's very similar to feedback we've received, is that if a student's not gonna get a 24, they're probably not also gonna get the 85. So that ASVAB score could very well come down.
Because if they're not getting 24, that eliminates them from both the orange and the blue column,
Yeah.
so,
So then
I mean, so then you.
Well, they could pass the
You
word
can
keys
take the
and get
keys, but
yeah.
you still have to get, yeah. that's
Yep,
what
they
I'm
still have to
saying.
get the 85, yeah. Alright.
Could a
Yep.
student graduate high school, go to basic training, and then get
Okay,
the
so that's
scholarship?
another good question. That's another thing we're probably gonna have to adjust during the next session, and I mentioned that to our legislators too.
Oh.
technically requirements have to be met before you graduate from high school. But I think we're gonna see if we can also, when we put forward a bill during this next session, see if we can change the language on that part to allow them to do basic training, like the summer after they graduate.
Yep.
Because I know that when I was in high school, it was pretty common for kids to do their basic training the summer between their junior and senior year, whereas now, my understanding is that most of that's taking place after they graduate from high school. So technically right now it's not. The good thing about us having this 3-year overlap is that a lot of these things we're talking about are mainly going to affect students that are probably sophomores or younger right now.
Yep.
And so we've got some time to deal with that. So that is something that we're also, we received some feedback on and are looking to possibly adjust. Okay. Well, one question I have, and I always ask the students this, how do you know if you're on track to visit to earn the scholarship, or more importantly, who do you visit with if you can't figure it out and you want to know? Who would you visit with?
Those two.
Those two activities, right? Visit with your school counselor. That's what we tell the students. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a few specific scenarios up on the board. You have your charts right there, and definitely use the charts as we're going through this here. And I'm just going to put some scenarios up here to say so-and-so did this, 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 and this. Do they meet whatever happened?
Can I just ask one
You
question?
bet.
On our, either our Power School or our, the Ed portal?
Yeah.
Can we track this? Cause somebody
Yes.
from Maple Valley was saying, oh, you can check online where, and I'm like,
Okay,
Yeah.
yes. So what you're referring to, no, I'm glad you brought that up. What you're referring to is in eTranscript or in the Ed portal. Right now, it's only set up for the old requirements, but you can go in and look at a nice chart. It's kind of what I was talking about earlier, of whether or not your son or daughter is on pace to qualify for either the old academic or the old CTE. They are in the process of developing something right now for these new requirements too. I was told it would be available later this fall sometime. Last I talked to them, which was a couple weeks ago, they're still working on it. But so yes, this will definitely be available, definitely in time before our sophomores and younger that need it are. But I was told it'll be available sometime this fall. So yep, so that's definitely a good tool. All right, so the first one here, I kind of gave you guys an easy one. The first one here. Question is, can a student qualify for the new scholarship with a grade point average under 3.0?
no.
The answer is no. It's one of the very first things listed in the yellow. That's an automatic, non-negotiable. By the way, one thing I want to point out, for those of you that have older students that have either already graduated or are juniors and seniors this year, the old set of requirements do require you to have a grade of C or better in every single class that's required for the scholarship, which includes all the graduation requirements. The new set of requirements wasn't written that way. You can get a grade below a C under the new requirements as long as it's not one of the specific courses that you're using to fulfill one of these specific requirements down here. So, for example, under the old set of requirements, when a student gets a D in 9th grade physical science, they're automatically out unless they retake that class. That's not going to be the case with these new requirements. It does look much more closely at like that 3.0 grade point average. Okay, so that's one thing. All right, second example. The rest of them aren't that easy. Second one here. On the essential skills up on top, would a student meet the essential skills if they completed 25 hours of community service, completed an online learning course, had a career exploration experience, and played 2 seasons of high school football?
Yes.
The answer here is yes, and where does the football fall in? Extracurricular. Yep. Example 3. Post-secondary ready, over in the bottom left-hand corner. Would a student meet post-secondary ready with an ACT of 22, a C in AP US History, and a C in college speech? Okay, the answer is no. We just talked about this, and what's the reason for it being no? ACT is kind of the hookup here. Example 4. Would a student meet the post-secondary ready column with an ACT of 26, a grade of C in AP US History, a grade of C in dual credit psychology? Okay. The answer here is no. And why? What's
They need
This is
English and
psychology.
English
The psychology,
It has
so
to be
English
the-
and math.
Well, and
Yep, the dual credit class under post-secondary has to be English or math. And so psychology is a social studies class, so that would be the disqualifier on this one. Example 5. Would a student meet the post-secondary ready with an ACT of 26, C or better in US history, AP US history, C or better in college speech? College speech is an English class, yes. Then the I should maybe, you guys are about the 5th or 6th school that I've visited so far this year, and every single one, maybe not everyone, but a lot of them have asked if college speech, maybe I'll change that to composition or something. Anyways, yes, college speech is an English class. Alright, example 6. Would a student meet the requirements to be workforce ready if, so we're in the middle column now, they have 22 on the ACT and did not take the work keys, they have 4 credits of career tech yet with 2 credits in the same plan of study, they take a dual credit psychology course, and they participated in a work-based learning experience. Now the answer here is no. What is the disqualifier here? It is again that ACT or not taking the work keys. Okay, we'll stay in that column. Post-secondary ready. Would a student meet the requirement to be workforce ready with 5 or higher on all 3 work keys exams, 4 credits of CTE spread out over 4 different plans of study, a dual credit psychology course, and participate in work-based learning? Okay, the answer here is also no, and why is that?
It's not 4 different study, it has to be
Yeah,
all
you gotta
the
have 2 credits in the same, at least 2 of the credits in the same plan of study. Okay, example 8. Would a student meet the requirements to be workforce ready if 5 or higher on the work keys, 4 credits of CTE, 2 in the same plan of study? This should say US history, dual credit US history course, and then participate in a work-based learning experience. The answer there is yes. Example 9, I think this is the last one. Yep. Would a student meet the military ready requirement if 87 on the ASVAB, a B in physical education, half credit dual credit composition, and then work 40 hours at a local fast food restaurant in the summertime?
40 hours good.
Yeah.
Education.
Yep. And remember, on the military ready, that's where you can go to the other 2 columns and pick a couple of the indicators. This one here would be workplace learning, which is over in the post-secondary or the workforce ready, and dual credit composition, because it's an English class, it's from either the post-secondary or the workforce ready, and it can be either 2 from post-secondary, 2 from workforce, or 1 from each. So that's how the requirements themselves work. We'll do a really quick little quiz and just kind of run through this really quick here. How much money is a scholarship worth each year? $1,500 each year. Max total is $6,000. Can students in the class of 23 and 24 still qualify using the old set of requirements?
Yep.
Yep. Juniors and seniors can still do. Question 3. I don't expect you to be able to read all those, but it's the same 8 things we talked about earlier. How many of those 8 do you have to have for the new requirements? 4. That is correct. Question 4. Minimum score that a student needs on the ACT to meet post-secondary or workforce? 24.
Is the super score kind of the big thing now? Is that continuing on?
Yes, so question about super scores. What an ACT super score is, a regular ACT is calculated, when the student takes the ACT, there's an English test, a reading test, a math test, and a science test. Each of them is worth 36 points. They get a score out of 36 on each, you add it up, divide by 4, and that's how you get the student's ACT score for one ACT. Now let's say that they take the ACT more than once. The first time they do really good on the math, and they kind of bomb the English, and the next time it's the other way around. The super score will take the best English test, the best reading test, the best math test, and the best science test, add it up, divide by 4, and calculate the score as if the student did it the same day. They're still demonstrating the same knowledge and competency, just did it on different days. So yes, we can accept a super score, and the reason we're able to accept that, we've been able to accept it for a couple years now, is because ACT just started doing super scores and publishing them 2 years ago. Universities have kind of been unofficially doing this for years, but because the law says we have to have an ACT of 24, we had to wait until ACT itself started doing it. Now that they are, we can do that.
Is that just something that's calculated at ACT, or do we gotta let someone else know?
No, ACT has to,
The super
and
score?
what you'll do is, the regular ACT score comes right through each transcript, and we can see that, I can see it on my end, and so can the school. But the super scores, we would need to get a copy of the student's score report. There is a way for you to send it to us electronically, however, that costs $15. We wanna save you $15 if we can. So if the school is able to print off a copy, or if you let us know your son or daughter's name and when they took it, if they took the test in North Dakota, we should be able to print it off on our end. If not, the student can log into their MyACT account and send it to us electronically. It costs $15. We want to avoid that if we can. So anyways, that's where they are.
You can let me know, and I usually have access to that.
Okay.
I just don't always know if they retook it or not, so you would just have to communicate that with me,
Yep.
and then I can find it and
Okay.
send it.
Question 5: Can the scholarship be used at UND? In state? Good. Did somebody say something about?
Taking shots at
You know, I was in a school one time. I was in a school one time, and I put this question up there, and somebody in the back of the room with an NDSU sweatshirt and NDSU hat on said, "Nope."
You might as well be wearing all.
He may as well. Maybe it was him. No, the only reason I know it wasn't him is because it was a different school. All right.
You're just trying.
One surprise when we're in
Next week's presentation too.
All right. Minimum grade point required.
It was Monday, right?
3.
Bottom of the business.
No, I am traveling on Monday. 3.0 is correct. All right. Can you use a scholarship to go to University of Minnesota? No. One thing I do want to point out, especially when I'm on the eastern side of the state, is that I get to ask the question about, well, what about reciprocity? And what about Moorhead State? What about Concordia? Just because we have reciprocity, that simply refers to what the price of tuition itself will be. Doesn't have anything to do with your state scholarship money does not cross the border. Okay, so just something to keep in mind with that. Minimum score needed on each of the 3 WorkKeys exams to be workforce ready? 5 out of 7 or better. Minimum score on the ASVAB for military ready? 85. How many credits of CTE does a student need for workforce ready? 4 with 2 in the same class. The most important question here for you as parents of younger students here, can the class of 2025 qualify using the bold set of scholarship requirements? The answer is no. You guys have asked some excellent questions today, and I want to answer any other questions that I can. You can either ask now, or if you don't feel comfortable asking in front of the whole group, I'm going to stick around until all questions are answered. So, anything else anybody is wondering? Well, if not, this is my contact info here. It's also in your brochure. 328-2244. That does not go to a front desk or anything. It goes directly to my office. So give me a call. That's my direct line, 328-2244, or jim.upgren@nd.gov. So thanks a lot for having me today. I really appreciate it. Happy to help you guys out any way that I can.